What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. If you're new here at About Trout, I do fly fishing how-tos, gear reviews, some vlog stuff, and fly tying, which is the nature of today's video. After my last video, I got a lot of emails and DMs asking me how I tied that search and destroy fly pattern, and we're gonna do that today because I'm here to give you people the content that you want, and I appreciate your support in watching the videos. So it's a guide fly, you could say. It can kind of be a little bit of a pain because there's a dubbing loop with some CDC in there, but we're gonna walk you through that today, make it nice and easy for you. And without further ado, we're gonna sit down at the vise and get this party started. All right, let's tie up ye olde search and destroy. In the vise, I have a Fulling Mill Jig short, size 16, matched with a 2.8 millimeter bead. I got 18-aught Semper fly, nano silk in black, and I'm just gonna start right behind the bead. Build a little thread base and bring that back to about where the barb would be. Trim that up. And I like to shoot these videos from a right-hand tier's perspective. When I was a kid, I learned how to fly tie from just reading books, or learning how to tie flies from reading books. And when I was 12, I was at an Orvis, and this guy, Ryan, from the Orvis in Arlington said, "Why are you tying left-handed and backwards?" And he corrected that for me. So Ryan, if somehow you're watching this video, you got a free boat ride on the San Juan. I'm gonna grab some Coq de Leon. I like about 4 to 6, somewhere in there. If you use 7 though, then you might not, just don't even fish this fly. So I think I got about 5. What I'm gonna do is just pull the fibers perpendicular to the stem. Make sure those tips nice and even. Pinch and trim. I want my tail to be about 3/4 to a shank length. So 3/4 of a shank or a full quarter, it just depends, or I'm sorry, or a full shank length. Just depends on what you're going for. That's perfect, obviously. So I'm gonna wrap this back to behind the slotted bead. I'm gonna trim these butt ends right here, boom. So this is called a search and destroy just because it's just a great all-around searching pattern. This has a flashback on it, has a tag, has a CDC collar, so you're throwing the whole kitchen sink at it. Now I'm gonna rivet, right? So I'm gonna use some Sculpin olive brassy wire. I'm gonna tie that in first. Did not bring my junk scissors. You don't really want to cut wire with your good scissors, it'll dull them out, but I'm gonna make that sacrifice for you guys. If I do that, I'm gonna open my scissors up and cut them basically down my throat there. So I'm gonna tie in my rib first. I'm just gonna open up that bead and secure that to the side. Then I'm gonna mount the flashback on top. Now for the flashback, I am going to use tinsel, size medium, the Opal Mirage color. Let's get that pulled up for you. I'm gonna mount this to the top of the fly. Now I'm gonna wrap the wire and the flashback to the tie-in point where those tails are, or where the tail is. And I'm gonna wrap right back up. I have a material clip on the vise. I'm just gonna use those as a third hand. And then I'm gonna use for the body, this is muskrat gray pheasant tail. You could use regular pheasant tail too. And I'm gonna pull off 4 fibers. And you don't have to worry about evening these up because we're just gonna wrap them through the body. 4 just seems to be a nice, you can still get a nice thin body, thin the wind. Can you use 5? Can you use 6? Can you use 27? You can do whatever you want. I'm gonna use 4 though. So come back in here, secure these, and again, I'm gonna wrap back to the tie-in point. I really like this 18-aught because it doesn't build bulk. and it's very secure. So I'm gonna throw in just a half hitch right behind the bead, reel up my thread, and rest it in the bobbin cradle, and I'm gonna use the rotary feature of this vise. But before I do that, I'm gonna take some Loctite super glue, and this is gonna make that pheasant tail a lot more secure. And again, it's a little awkward. I have this camera in between me and the vise, but I think I like the finished product. So I'm gonna just wrap, touching wraps, and just polymer this to right behind the bead. You can leave a little gap in there. Come grab that. Trim it up. I'm gonna take my flashback and pull it right over the top. Secure that, trim it up, boom. So you can see there's some steps in here. It's not a hard pattern to tie, it's just time consuming. So these are ones you might want to save for you, not hand them out like candy. So now that I have the flashback in there, I wrap towards myself. When I use the pheasant tail, I'm gonna wrap away from myself. I'm gonna counter rivet. So just throw a half hitch right behind the bead. And this is basic rotary tying. One of the advantages of having a rotary vise. So I'm just gonna do some spiral wraps through. And then just tie that off. Boom. So when I get to this point, it's basically like you could just make this into a flashback Frenchie if you want, but I like to step tie these. I lost one in the process, but I'll usually, if I'm tying a bunch, I'm gonna whip finish and super glue and just save this step, because this next step is where this next part of the fly is a little more time consuming than that. So I'll do about a half a dozen of those basically flashback pheasant tails like that, and then the next day I'll go finish this part. So this is part deux, which is French for two. Next, we're gonna just rotate the vise. And I'm gonna use some Glow Bright shade number 5. And that's gonna be our tag. So, just gonna cut a strand of it, come in here and half it. And I'm just using one strand, so the tag is gonna be made up of 2 strands. You can use 2 to 4 strands. Oh, gonna tighten that up. All right, pull that right up on top. I'm gonna wrap back about a hook eye's length. So now I have my Glow Bright tag secured. I'm gonna come in and cut it about halfway in between the point of the hook and the shank. So there's my tag. All right, we're gonna flip the vise back over. Got my tag in there. And now we're gonna run a dubbing loop. In the dubbing loop, it's just gonna be CDC. You can use slate gray or you can use dark dun. I'm gonna use some dark dun. So I'm gonna try to find like a nice full feather just like that. I'm gonna stroke back the fibers and I'm gonna grab it with my clip. This is a Stanfo clip. I think most fly shops sell these for around 18 bucks. Got it in my clip and I'm gonna trim out the stem. So trim, I'm gonna trim the stem. I'm sorry, I'm gonna trim the fibers away from the stem. So there it is. Now we're gonna create our dubbing loop. So I'm gonna push towards myself and do one wrap towards myself. Come over and lock that loop down. I'm gonna use my dubbing spinner and hook the bottom of this loop. Drop that down in there, and I'm gonna feed this loop with the CDC that I just trimmed. So I'm gonna take that, catch those fibers, release. Hopefully you can see that. And then I'm going to, this is a little tough with the camera in here, but I'm gonna trim the butt ends. And that's just gonna give me a really nice and neat loop when I spin it. I would trim these a lot tighter, but I'm not gonna lie to you, it's pretty tough with the camera in front. It's not gonna make that big of a difference. So I'm gonna go ahead and give that dubbing loop a spin. And it's creating a nice CDC hackle for us. All right, gonna lift that up, comb these fibers back. And I'm less is more with CDC, so I'm gonna do about a full turn. So that just got some of the thread out of the way. And it came out of my hook, but that's okay. Some technical difficulties. That's about 1.5, but that'll do. So I'm gonna come in here, comb that back, pinch that loop, and trim. So I have this nice wispy CDC collar. And that would have looked a lot cleaner if the hook did not slip out of the loop. But there you go. That will work. Less is definitely more. I can comb back the CDC pinch and just break off some of the feathers to make a nice even collar. And then for the final step, it's just going to be a collar of squirrel dub. So I'm just gonna use a very light pinch. Get those guard hairs in there. And we're gonna do a very loose noodle. You can use dubbing wax, but I find if you don't use it, those guard hairs will pop out and give it a real buggy look, like that. So just a couple turns, come in here, but right behind the bead, and then I'm gonna hit this with super glue and whip finish. So put some super glue on there. All right, use the end of my whip finisher to cut the thread. And that's it. Pat yourself on the back. You just tied a search and destroy. If you're gonna be really picky like I can be sometimes, I'll come back and trim out some of those straggly guard hairs, just again for aesthetic. So I might come back in, trim that so it's nice and neat, but that's it. You tied yourself a search and destroy. Go out, catch a bunch of fish on it. It's an absolute staple in my box. Appreciate all the comments that I got asking about this pattern, and I hope this catches a bunch of fish for you. Let me know how you like it in the comments down below, and I'll catch you guys on the next video.